Alright guys, so we're going to do a quick run through of a pedigree here. So I have one sitting in front of me now, and it's a 3-generation pedigree where we have 3 people who are affected by the trait, and that's going to be people who are going to be shaded in. As you can see right here, they're going to be darker than the other shapes. Remember, a square represents a male, circle represents a female, and a line between the two represents a marriage and then or a mating action and an offspring that are coming down this line, and then we have 4 kids from this first generation right here. So the first steps you want to do whenever you're solving a pedigree is, if you don't see your generations labeled, you might want to go ahead and label them. So we have 1, 2, and 3, so that we know how many generations we have. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you do GGC. And if you don't remember, GGC stands for gender, generation, I can type, and carriers. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to start with gender, and gender is going to tell you whether or not it's autosomal or sex-linked. And so if we start with counting up the number of affected per gender, we have 2 females, these 2 circles. We have 1 male, that's square. So we have a 2 female to 1 male ratio, meaning that we have a pretty even ratio, so we're going to go ahead and say that it is autosomal. If you were to have a ratio where there's only men affected, or it's like a 4-to-1 ratio, then it's probably going to be sex-linked, and that would kind of change the way that we're going to do this. And so what we can go ahead and do now is we can go ahead and set up our key. We know now that we're going to have an autosomal key, which is just basic Mendelian genetics, right? So we're going to go ahead and set that up over here because it's nice and easy, because we have a really simple key. We don't have to do 5 different genotypes. So let's go ahead and center that so we know that it's the key. And those 3 things are the genotypes. So let's move on to the next step of GGC. It's going to be generation. Generation is going to tell you if it's dominant or recessive. So we look at each generation. We look at generation 1. We have a person affected in generation 1. We have a person affected in generation 2. And then in generation 3, we don't. So if it's not in every single generation, you can go ahead and make the assumption that it's going to be recessive. And you can go ahead and put that in your GGC. Now, if we were to see a darkened in shape in every single generation, 1, 2, and 3, then we could go ahead and say it's dominant, but it's not, at least in this case. And then we're going to ask ourselves, okay, do we have carriers? In this case, yes, we do have carriers, because it's a recessive trait. So we're going to have carriers. And if you want to, you can designate this little genotype with a star, because that one is going to be our carrier genotype. It's got to be our heterozygous. So the second part of the carriers question is, okay, do we have carriers? Yes. Second part is, are they males or are they females, or are they both? And if it's autosomal, then does it matter really which one, male or female, has this particular genotype, this little genotype right here, the heterozygous? No, it doesn't matter. So it's going to be both male and female carriers. And unfortunately for us, it's not shown on our pedigree whether or not we have carriers. So we're going to have to figure that out. And we can do that rather simply. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill in our key first before we do that. So we know that it's a recessive trait, so my homozygous dominant is going to be normal. My heterozygous is still going to be normal, except they carry the trait, but they do not show that in their phenotype. I don't know why it autocorrects to that. Stop doing that. That's weird. Okay, well, Google Slides apparently hates me, so we're just gonna, okay. We're not gonna put a space. This one's going to have the trait, and of course it does that. I don't know why it's doing that. Interesting. Okay, it stayed. So let's say that we're tracking albinism, because that is an autosomal trait. And watch, it'll capitalize this when I do a spacebar. Yep, that's it. Okay. All right, so we'll just go back and we'll do that, and we'll be done with it. There we go. Don't know why Google Slides is deciding to do that, but you know what? It's a little bit of fun. It just makes me want to edit this, but I'm not going to. So let us move on. So now we have our key. All right. And so we're going to solve for every single person in this pedigree. So the first thing you need to do is go ahead and fill in the ones that you know. And there are at least 3 that you know for a fact what their genotypes are. And it's going to be that guy right there. We're going to copy and paste this because, well, you know what, we can. And we just drag that right here. Look at how beautiful that looks. Yes, yes, yes. Make sure that we can see those. And we're going to copy and paste it again. And we're going to put that right here. Because we know for a fact that those 3 are going to be homozygous recessive because they're the only 3 albinos in this family. So now let's move on to the next one that we know. So we have 2 albinos here in this particular generation, in generation 2. We know that mom can only give a recessive trait because that's all she has. She only has 2 recessive traits. So we know now that dad has to be a carrier because he also has to donate a recessive allele. And if you need to see this, you can do a Punnett square and you can see that it's a 50-50 shot of having someone who is albino. So let's go ahead and fill in his genotype here. Let's give him that carrier genotype, big A or capital A, little a. So now we have our beautiful little pedigree filling out nice and cleanly here. And we know this daughter right here, we know daughter number 1 as well because dad and mom, she's not albino or else she'd be filled in. Dad and mom, again, mom can only donate a recessive allele. So that means that she also, just like her father, has to be a carrier because mom has to donate a recessive and she's not albino, so dad had to give her this dominant allele that's over here, making her quote-unquote normal. Alright, so what about son number 2, or if you're studying for your test, you know that it would be generation 2, person 4 would be this guy, so that's what we're talking about here. He also doesn't have the disorder, so we need to go ahead and fill him in as a carrier. And it's the exact same reason as his sister over here. We know that mom can only give recessive. I think I just moved the pedigree. Whoopsies. There we go. We know that mom can only give a recessive trait, whereas dad has to give him the dominant because he is not albino. And if there's a way for me to do this, I'm going to see if I can fill in my carriers. I'm not sure if you guys remember. We're going to give this a shot. Oh, well, look at that. Look at how good I am. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and fill in these guys. Whoopsies. Let's not copy that. So we're going to go ahead and paste it. It's going to look kind of weird because it's on a circle, but I don't really care. There we go. So we filled in some of it. Yes, I'm too lazy to actually make half a circle because that requires a lot of work and I don't want to do it. So here's this. Here's, we can get him to fit there. Okay. There we go. Oh. Why did it work on that guy? And didn't, whatever. It works. So now we have our carriers filled in. And so we see mom over here, you know, married into the family, has 3 kiddos, none of which have albinism or are albino. So the problem when we get to this extended family is we really don't know what genotypes she's bringing into play. We have to assume that because none of her kids have the disorder, that she is most likely homozygous dominant, but we don't really know that for a fact. So if something were to come along in like her grandkids, we would be able to see her exact genotype. Now the problem with each one of these kiddos is that we don't know if they inherited 2 dominant alleles or a dominant allele and a recessive allele. So for each one of these kiddos down here, we have to go ahead and say, you know what, we don't really know about these guys, so give you a little graphic visual here. We don't really know about these guys, so we are going to assume that they could be either one, since we can't prove it. And so that's how you solve for a pedigree. It's really rather simple, something that you've been doing a lot of practice of, or a lot of practice with. And if you guys have any questions, please just let me know and hit me up on Remind. And good luck studying for your test. See you guys tomorrow, unless there's a snow day. Peace.